It all began on a bright Monday morning when the neighborhood looked as peaceful as ever. The birds were singing, the sun cast a golden glow across the streets, and neighbors were quietly heading to work. But behind one small ranch-style home at the end of the cul-de-sac, a storm was brewing. Jake, a hard-working man in his late 30s, stood on his porch watching a group of contractors tear down something precious, the wheelchair ramp he and his sister had built just weeks ago. His sister, Emily, lived with him. She had lost mobility after a car accident 2 years prior and used a wheelchair daily. That ramp wasn't just wood and nails, it was her lifeline to the world outside. Jake rushed forward, his voice sharp with disbelief. "What are you doing? That ramp belongs here. She needs it." The workers shrugged, explaining they were just following HOA orders. Standing nearby, HOA President Karen, a woman in a tailored cream suit and a perpetual scowl, folded her arms smugly. "It violates community guidelines," she said coldly. "No structures without prior approval." Jake's fists tightened at his sides. He had filed all the paperwork. He had even spoken to the HOA office weeks ago and received no objections. But Karen, hungry for control and eager to make an example out of him, had taken matters into her own hands. Emily watched from the window, her eyes filling with tears as the boards were ripped apart piece by piece. To her, it felt like her independence was being bulldozed along with the wood. The ramp came crashing down, and with it, Jake felt his trust in the HOA shatter. He didn't know it yet, but this single act of arrogance would spark a chain of events that none of them could have ever imagined. Inside the house, Emily sat quietly in her chair, her hands trembling. She wasn't just sad, she was humiliated. For weeks, she had worked up the courage to go outside again, to feel the breeze, to visit the park down the street. That ramp had symbolized freedom. And in less than an hour, it was gone. Jake kneeled beside her and whispered, "I'm so sorry, Em. They had no right to do this." Emily placed her hand over his, her eyes steady despite the pain. "Jake, don't apologize. This isn't your fault. But they will regret underestimating us." Her voice carried a calm certainty, almost too calm for the moment. Jake was confused but nodded, not realizing yet what she meant. That night, Jake stayed up late, gathering every receipt, every email, and every approval notice he had kept. He was determined to fight the HOA in court if he had to. But when he showed Emily the stack of papers, she smiled faintly and said, "Keep those safe. They'll be useful. But you don't need to go to court. Not this time." The next day, HOA President Karen strutted through the neighborhood, bragging to her circle of loyal board members. "Rules are rules," she declared loudly. "If we don't enforce them, people will think they can build whatever they want." But her pride blinded her to the truth that the very person she had tried to humiliate had power she couldn't begin to imagine. Jake didn't know it yet, but Emily had been quietly holding back her identity. To neighbors, she was just a young woman in a wheelchair. To the state, she was something far greater. Within days, the HOA issued Jake a fine. A bright red notice was taped to his front door, $500 for unauthorized construction. Jake tore it down in disbelief. He stormed to the next HOA meeting, where Karen sat at the head of the table, smiling smugly as if she had already won. "You destroyed her ramp," Jake said firmly, holding the broken notice in his hand. "Now you fine us for it? This is harassment." Karen leaned back in her chair, her voice dripping with condescension. "It's not harassment. It's the law of this community. If you want to stay here, you play by our rules. Or you can sell your house and move out." Her words cut deep. The room murmured with whispers. Some neighbors shifted uncomfortably. But none dared to challenge Karen. Jake clenched his jaw, ready to argue, but Emily, who had rolled in quietly at the back of the room, raised her hand. Her presence stunned the room into silence. "I'd like to say something," she said calmly. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Residents only," she snapped. Emily's gaze sharpened. "I am a resident. And more importantly, you should know who you're trying to intimidate." The silence in the room grew heavy. Emily didn't reveal her hand yet, but her voice carried authority that made even the board members straighten in their seats. Karen, oblivious, scoffed and dismissed her with a wave. That arrogance would be her undoing. Later that week, Jake noticed unusual movement near their home. City trucks arrived, measuring sidewalks and making notes. He asked one of the workers what was happening, and the man replied, "Governor's orders. We're here to check ADA compliance in this neighborhood." Jake froze. He turned to Emily, who sat on the porch with a calm smile. "Emily. Did you?" She nodded. "Jake, I didn't want to tell you like this, but it's time you knew. I'm not just your sister in a wheelchair. I'm the sitting governor of this state. And the HOA just bulldozed my accessibility ramp, the very symbol of independence for thousands like me." Jake's jaw dropped. He had known she worked in politics before her accident. But he never imagined she had risen this far. Suddenly, everything clicked. Her calmness, her quiet confidence, the way she had told him not to worry. That night, Emily made a single phone call. And the ripple effect was immediate. Funding audits were ordered. HOA grants were frozen. Inspectors were dispatched. Karen, still smug, had no idea that the ground beneath her HOA was already crumbling. The next HOA meeting didn't go as Karen planned. Instead of a quiet room under her control, it was filled with state officials carrying clipboards. They inspected documents, asked questions, and demanded financial records. Board members who once sat confidently now fidgeted nervously. Karen tried to maintain control. "This is harassment," she barked. But one inspector calmly replied, "No, ma'am. This is accountability." Jake watched as Emily sat quietly in the back, her presence commanding more respect than any HOA bylaw. He finally understood she wasn't fighting for herself. She was fighting for every resident who had been bullied, fined, or silenced. Neighbors began whispering among themselves. Some even approached Jake after the meeting, apologizing for staying silent before. "We didn't know who your sister was," one neighbor admitted. Jake shook his head. "You don't need to know her title to treat her with respect. You just need to know she's human." The tide was shifting. Karen, for the first time, looked rattled. Desperate, Karen staged one last stunt. She marched to Jake and Emily's house with a group of board members and demanded they vacate the property, claiming they were in violation. But this time, she wasn't met with silence. She was met with state troopers, standing tall at the gate. Emily rolled forward, her voice calm but firm. "Karen, I gave you chances. I gave you time to reflect. Instead, you chose arrogance. This neighborhood will no longer be ruled by fear." Karen sputtered, pointing wildly. "You can't do this. You're just..." She froze as Emily's title was announced by one of the troopers, Governor Emily Richards. Gasps erupted from the neighbors who had gathered to watch. The truth was undeniable now. Karen's face drained of color. For once, she had no words. Within weeks, the HOA was dissolved. Its misused funds were redirected back into the community. Streets were repaired, parks improved, and yes, a brand new wheelchair ramp was built at Jake and Emily's home, stronger and better than ever. Neighbors who had once feared Karen now stood united, grateful for Emily's quiet but powerful stand. Jake looked at his sister one evening as the sun set behind their house. "You didn't just fight for yourself. You fought for everyone here." Emily smiled, her eyes glistening. "That's what leadership is, Jake. Not control, not fear, but giving people back their dignity." Karen disappeared from the neighborhood soon after, her reign of control nothing more than a bitter memory. The community thrived under new, fair leadership. And Emily, once underestimated, became a symbol of resilience not just for her street, but for the entire state, and that was the final twist in this unbelievable HOA story. If you loved the drama, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment sharing your thoughts. It really helps this channel grow.